soy is a good idea, but, and here to explain that but part of it and qualify it with science and some serious facts and figures is Sally Fallon, who is one of America's most unusual food experts. She is definitely not politically correct, and she has a book called Nourishing Traditions, and she is based primarily with the Weston A. Price Foundation, which we're going to tell you about right now. Welcome to the program, Sally.
Thank you, Jeff.
Tell us about Weston. Who is Weston A. Price?
Good old Weston.
Why should we care?
Well, we should care because he did an experiment or a study that cannot be repeated today, and it has a real bearing on our health, and particularly the health of the next generation. He studied the traditional or primitive, so-called primitive tribes back in the days when they still existed.
When they were still primitive and still out there, yeah.
Right. He went to isolated corners of the globe and looked at their health. He took a camera along with him and took pictures of these people. And when you read his book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, then you suddenly realize what healthy people look like, because they have just gorgeous teeth, real broad faces, and very straight teeth, wide palates, as he said. That's the way he put it. And not only that, they were free from tooth decay, and they also had it was easy to have children, ease of reproduction, and they didn't have any diseases. They didn't have infectious disease, and they didn't have cancer and heart disease and all these things. So he then set out to analyze their diets, and we may come loggerheads here because the most important things in the diets, the foods considered sacred and that were extremely important for reproduction, were certain animal foods, and particularly the fats from the animals. Very good example that I just learned about, a sacred food among the American Indians was the bear. But the bear, they didn't eat the meat of the bear, they just ate the fat and the skin. And they threw the lean meat away. So there was a real emphasis on the fats and the vitamins that come in the fats. And if they were a seafaring people, then they ate lots and lots of fish.
Right. I must say, though, that those primitive peoples did not have to deal with the chemicals, toxins, and all the rest that come hand in hand.
But you know, it's just as bad in the plant foods. The average crop gets 10 applications of pesticides, and these are estrogens. They're hormones.
That's right.
And so our message at the Weston A. Price is we have to clean up our diet right across the act. Clean up our act right across the board.
Yep.
Plant foods, animal foods.
Or we can clean up the board right across our act. It doesn't matter. We just have to make changes.
And our members are encouraged to spend a good portion of their food budget directly from the farmer. And we encourage mixed farms where the animals are on the farm and where pesticides are not used.
Understand. Well, we're talking organic here. We're talking natural.
You know, in a way, yes. But I think as far as animal foods, organic is not going to do it for you, because you can still call milk or eggs from animals in confinement, you can still call it organic.
I was really alluding to vegetables, but yes, I got your point.
Yeah.
Okay, let me take us to soy, which has become the #1 cash crop on the planet. You mentioned that the average vegetable is sprayed a dozen times.
Or 10 times, yes.
Whatever, 10, 12, who's counting? You know,
right,
you get up that high, it gets to be silly. There are allowable levels of pesticides and herbicides in our food. It just sounds crazy when you give children an okay amount of pesticides to eat. It's just weird.
Yeah, and these are hormones.
Yes, they're estrogens. They're environmentally based, as it were. They're not in a capsule or a tablet.
That's right.
But they're estrogens nonetheless, and they are a major contributing factor to causing so many young people to go through puberty 1, 2, 3, and even 4 years too soon.
I think so. In fact, DES, which is a hormone, was implicated, and in the Puerto Rican study, it was in soy. Now, the hormones in soy, the estrogens in soy, are the pesticides built in, and when the insect comes in contact with these estrogens, eats them, he becomes sterile. So this is, you can spray them on, or you can have them in the plant.
All right. In the case of soy, you're saying estrogen occurs naturally.
That's right.
At a fairly substantial level to begin with.
Exactly.
And then when you dose it with 10 or 12 sprayings pesticides, herbicides, and other good sides, you've got a real problem.
Well, in fact, the genetically modified soy was developed so that they
enhanced it.
Could spray more herbicides on.
Yeah. They enhanced the potential so they could douse it with Roundup, and it would stand it. It would take it.
And the interesting thing is that the genetically modified soy is much higher in trypsin inhibitors. Now, trypsin inhibitors are these very large, tightly folded proteins that inhibit protein digestion. And one of the big problems with the soy foods is that it's very hard to get these out of the soy. And they can cause, pancreatic problems, digestive problems, and so forth, and protein deficiencies. And the genetically modified soy has more of these trypsin inhibitors in it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Not to mention the genetic aspects of it. What are we doing with GM foods in our bodies, and how are they reacting? Where are they going in the environment and all that? Something like 85 to 90% of all soy is GM now and sprayed. It's hard to find organic, non-GM soy. Even then, though, we have an elevated level of estrogen, you're saying.
That's right. And, when we look at, there's a lot of misconceptions about the Asian diet. When you look at Asian diets, and we have several dietary surveys, in Japan, it looks like the average soy consumption is about 10 grams a day. That's 2 teaspoons. And that's mostly fermented soy, or a little tofu that's eaten with a fish broth that counteracts some of these mineral-blocking things. So, and it's not being used as a replacement for animal foods. In fact, in Japan, the average consumption of fish is 150 pounds per person per year. So that's almost half a pound a day.
That's extraordinary. I had no idea it was that high.
And then in China, the survey done in China in, I believe it was the 60s, found that 65% of the calories in the Chinese diet came from pork. That's because they're eating pork and they're cooking in pork fat or lard. And so, soy has a place if it's used wisely, and it can be a wonderful flavoring and so forth. And I'm sure that in small amounts it has many good properties, but it's almost always fermented. And as I say, it's used in great moderation. So it's not being used as people are using it here as a highly processed food in very large amounts.
Soy protein isolate is one of the things you'll find in almost every so-called health nutrition bar, power bars, and all the rest of them that they use, snack on the run.
Good question here. Who makes most of the soy protein isolate? It's DuPont. They are the owners of Protein Technologies International.
Right.
So the same people who are bringing you, all these pesticides.
Yeah, I knew that, and I'm glad you brought that up. Now, tell our listeners, and I remember, boy, I've got to get him back on the program, Dr. Russell Blaylock, M.D., to talk about his book, Excitotoxins, The Taste That Kills. He points to soy protein isolate as being one of the worst offenders in that whole class of, it causes the brain, the neurons, to trigger over and over and over till they fatigue.
Right. They add a lot of MSG to these products to make them taste like meat, but they're also formed during processing. And I didn't know that he had said that, and that's very interesting because a lot of people have said to me, well, when I drink soy, I get a real lift. And I have often suspected that there's something going on here.
There you go.
It's almost a drug-like effect.
Right.